Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Graham, a novelist, illustrator, and truck driver in Oklahoma City. Let's talk about the Cytonic series by Brandon Sanderson because the fourth and final book just came out this week. I got the titles here over my shoulder. Can't really see them. I need bigger markers. Skyward, Starsight, Cytonic, and Defiant, which is the latest installment. There is also a trilogy of tie-in novels co-written by Jancy Patterson, but we'll get to those in just a minute. The series started in 2018. There were 2 volumes out, and then he took a year off. 3rd volume came out, took another year off. Final volume came out. But it's Brandon Sanderson. He publishes like 8 books a year, so the gaps are a little bit understandable. Let's do the recap of those first 3. We'll touch on that other trilogy, and then you guys can head off and read the final one. All right, our main character is a 17-year-old girl named Spensa. This is set in the future, somewhere out in a distant corner of the galaxy. She lives on a planet called detritus. That is a fancy Latin word that just means debris. It makes sense because there's a debris field up in orbit that's been there for about 100 years, and the humans on the surface are stranded there. They got into a space battle with some aliens called the Krell, and now they scratch out a meager existence doing some farming and whatnot, and their main resource is harvesting salvage that falls from that debris ceiling. Spensa wants to be a pilot in the Detritus Defense Force like her father was, although his name is kind of mud because he was in a battle several years ago where he was then accused of desertion, and people are wondering if she might be the same way if she ever gets in the DDF. She obviously doesn't think that she will be. She wants to go serve her planet and, potentially clear her father's name. She doesn't think that he was a bad guy. She loves her dad. And so she wants to become a member of this DDF. The Krell, for their part, they seem hell-bent on keeping the humans stuck on detritus. Motives unclear as to why. But since the humans don't want to be trapped there forever, and they have been stuck there for a very long time, 5 generations now, they've got this Top Gun recruiting program where they need pilots to come and fly their spacecraft and duke it out with the Krell and hopefully one day liberate themselves from this world. Spensa takes an admissions test to get into the academy, but the Admiral, Ironsides is his name, he rigs the test so that she can't pass. She takes the test anyway, and a sympathetic professor named Cobb, who was her father's wingman back in the day, sees that she got a near perfect score, and he says, "Look, I can bring you into my class, but Ironsides is going to make some things difficult, but he can't override this, so you'll get to be a student in my class." She's in a crew of fellow cadets that are quite numerous. I'm not going to rattle off all their names here. Plenty of them are going to wash out of the program. A couple of them are even going to die. So, the stakes are high in this. It's not just a VR school or something like that. There will be casualties. But she's going to try to get along with them. They, like everybody else on detritus, they know the history with her father, and some of them are very antagonistic towards her. But it's not even though some of these students are well connected, it's not like a nepotism thing. They also have earned their places in the school. This place can't afford to fall victim to the normal tricks of politics where, if you've got a rich uncle or something, you get to move to the head of the class. It's like you've got to earn your way in there. And so while she is, experiencing animosity to and from a lot of these other students, they do deserve to be there. I thought that was an interesting touch. Because Headmaster Ironsides has it out for Spensa, he doesn't allow her to stay on campus or use their facilities. To the extent possible, he does make things very difficult for her. So she's got to live in a network of caves off campus, and she has to shoot rats with her laser pistol for food. During her explorations of these caves, she comes across an ancient fighter, it's like 20 years old, an old spacecraft that is mostly corroded, mostly shut off, but the AI is still able to boot up. It knows that its name is M-Bot, and that's about it. All it remembers is that its last order from its last pilot was to stay hidden. The ship is otherwise inoperational. One other interesting thing of note is that she finds a slug that lives in the cave. They're apparently around there. It's somewhat sentient. It's capable of repeating speech like a parrot, and she nicknames this thing Doom Slug. She ends up sleeping in the cockpit of M-Bot as she's in between classes and stuff. Another development is that the Krell regularly attack even with school in session, and despite these students not being completely trained, they do get sent up because the DDF is shorthanded, and some of these students die while they're in school. It's basically Hogwarts in space. Things come to a head when Spensa gets shot down during one of these battles, and Headmaster Ironsides expels her from the academy. The Krell then go and attack, but it turns out that it was a diversion. While the entire DDF is on another part of the planet, they send in a bomber to go and attack some of the mainstays of the colony. Because there are no fighters and there's nobody else around, Spensa, who at this point has gotten M-Bot operational, she stole a power cell from another kid's car, she stole a booster from a wrecked ship. She was able to get it up and running, but the AI still won't violate its last order from its established commander to stay hidden. But since there's nobody around to see, Spence is able to take him up in the air and they go fight. She blows up the bomber, saves the day, and now she's a full-on pilot. However, she does discover something interesting about herself. She's got what's called the defect. It's a set of psychic powers, these Cytonic powers for which the series is named, where she's able to glimpse things that are happening across space and time, and she's also able to receive psychic messages from people across great distances. She doesn't know the full ramifications or parameters of these powers. That's something she's going to have to figure out through the remainder of the series, but somebody talked to her across the Gulf. She did realize that her father wasn't a deserter. Before the story ended, she was told that he actually turned on his fellow wingmen, his fellow flight mates, that's what the crews are called, as flights, and started attacking them. What she realizes is that basically his Cytonic powers were hacked and he was manipulated into attacking his own wingmen. She doesn't want to go that route. She's got to learn more about these powers and control them so that she's not susceptible to the same thing that her father was. But they repel this attack. As a final interesting thing of note, she learns that the Krell are just one wing of this larger conglomerate of multiple alien races who are determined to not only keep this batch of humans on detritus, but wipe out all of humanity. We don't know why. We're going to get a better idea of that in the second book. All right, book 2, Starsight. We're actually fighting up in space now, up in high orbit, not just in atmospheric conditions. The Superiority, which is the name of the big conglomerate of aliens, like I said, the Krell is just one wing of that. They're bringing in more and more forces because they're not satisfied with the status quo. They realize that with a Cytonic in their midst, one that wasn't as corruptible as the last one, they've got a problem and they need to solve this human issue now. Admiral Ironsides is no longer in charge of the DDF. Now Cobb is, the man who was Spence's father's wingman. Fathers, brothers, nephews, cousins, former roommate, you know how it goes. He's in charge, so that's one major obstacle out of her way. She starts learning more about her defect, her Cytonic powers. There are other aliens who are Cytonic. One such was a character named Alanik, a female alien of some other race. She crash lands on detritus while she's knocked out, but before she landed, she Cytonically connected with Spensa, and Spensa learned where she came from and what her mission was. Using some holographic technology that M-Bot has, Spensa decides to make herself look like Alanik, go back up into space, meet up with the Superiority on their space station, and pass as an alien so that she can learn more about what's going on up there. Most of the book, Starsight is the name of this station, most of this book is concerned with politics and military tactics and all this stuff that the Superiority is up to. It turns out they are not completely unified like any multifaceted giant organization would not be. There are some that have different ideas and they want to use different tactics with regard to the human problem. So she learns a lot about that. Another interesting thing that she learns is the Superiority wants to annihilate humanity because as humanity became more tied in with Cytonic powers, using those powers opened a rift between our dimension and another dimension that allowed super powerful beings called Delvers to come in, and they could destroy entire planets. The Superiority doesn't want humanity to do that again, obviously, and so since they are viewed as the weak link, that's why they want to annihilate all of us in this dark and dreary future. Their ships are powered by, this was another interesting twist, to some degree, all those slugs, the doom slug critter that Spensa's running around with, they have some kind of innate power that allows them to basically work like some kind of nuclear reactor warp core thingy in space. And the Krell, the superiority, all these aliens, they can plug these slugs into their ship and make them go to warp 10 or whatever. And so once she realizes that Doomslug is an engine, that becomes very valuable to her, to Spensa. As a result of her exploration and her intermingling with all these other aliens up on Starsight, Spensa starts to think that there can be a diplomatic solution to this problem between the superiority and humanity, and not a military one, and certainly not one that results in humanity's annihilation. The problem is she's got to convince a lot of people with very big guns that that is the case. Well, Spensa is able to befriend most of the aliens in this new crew, as when she's posing as Alanik. There is one in particular that will not. When she does finally turn off the hologram and reveal to him who she is, and she's like, hey, if I'd wanted to be a hazard, I could have been this entire time, but I actually want to work with you guys. He still doesn't buy it, still causes trouble for her, and now the full military operation is in swing. The story ends with Spensa's Cytonic powers escalating and elevating and all that to the point where she's able to teleport things from one spot to another. She also meets a Delver, who, these are one of these crazy, powerful creatures that can destroy an entire planet. She's able to teleport the Delver back to the superiority as she leaves. What else happens? She recovers M-Bot and Doomslug from the Starsight station, although she only has M-Bot's consciousness. The ship was dismantled, but she's got the AI core. She uses her powers again, and she teleports the three of them into what is called the Nowhere. This is the other dimension. There is the Nowhere, and there is the Somewhere. Everybody else is in the Somewhere. We are now currently in the Somewhere, but she heads off to the Nowhere. As a final side note, one of Spensa's flight mates on Detritus, the crew, that was called Skyward, hence the title of the first book. His name was Jorgen. He was kind of the alpha dog, the Iceman of this Top Gun crew, if you will. He also manifests Cytonic powers, and he leads the other members of Skyward into a cavern where they find a ton of those slugs with the hyperdrive powers. This is a staple of Sanderson's writing, where he kind of keeps it generally entertaining as the narrative unfolds, but by the time you come to the end of a book, you realize that he's setting up a whole ton of pieces on a game board, and then he does the famous Sanderson avalanche. Everything comes together at the end, and it's entertaining. I was certainly kind of blown away and taken by surprise by it the first several times that I read it. It's a little bit more recognizable now. Knowing that there's going to be something very good coming at the end makes me a little bit more patient with this slower and more drawn-out process. This was, I want to say, the first book where I was kind of a little bit less impressed by it. It's like, okay, you got the aliens, you got the Cytonics, you got the Somewhere and the Nowhere and the Delvers and the Doom Slugs and the whatever. I had some kind of confidence that it was going to, build up and resolve the way that a lot of his other ones did. I will say that I wish that the pacing had accelerated and that he hadn't taken as much time to get there. That might have also been a condition of having to wait so long for the third book. It was 2018 and 2019 for the first two. He took 2020 off from this series. 21 was Cytonic. 22 there was nothing that came out, and then now here we are in 2023 with the final book. I would have liked those to come along a little bit faster, especially because these are kind of geared more towards a teen audience, and those books tend to move more quickly, but it is what it is. That was just my kind of personal take with it. All right, now we get into the trilogy of tie-in novels, the Skyward Flight novels. The titles were Sunreach, Redawn, and Evershore. Each one of these focuses on a different member of Skyward Flight. Sunreach, the focal character, is a girl whose call sign is FM, like the radio band. She and the others are trying to wake up Alanik, the alien girl. In Redawn, the focal character is Alanik. You get a glimpse of what the political and diplomatic conditions were like on Starsight and what the whole issue is there between two rival parties, unity, independence, blah, blah, blah. Ironically, aliens are arguing about the same thing that we humans have been on Earth for thousands of years. And then everything leading up to her making Cytonic contact with Spensa and crashing on Detritus and yada, yada, yada. The interesting thing there is that she might have a solution to the war that can save both sides, much in the same way that Spensa did. In the final book, Evershore, that's the one that focuses on Jorgen. He's the one that found the cave full of slugs. He's figuring out his Cytonic powers. He knows far less about them because he's not as far along in his development as Spensa was, and so that creates its own set of hazards. He does find out that he might have relatives on another planet that he can contact cytonically, but there's a big question mark hanging over his head as to whether this is just a trap set for him by cytonics out there in the galaxy who have better control of their own powers. So, big questions hanging there. Like I said, that trilogy all happens while Spensa is, either out in Starsight or out in the nowhere. Because she spends so much time, away from the other characters in the books, there's some merit to exploring what was going on back on her homeworld that she's trying to protect. Cytonic. Gonna be honest with you, this one gets a little bit weird, especially compared to how the first one was. Skyward was mostly on detritus. Starsight was mostly on a space station. This one is out in some weird pocket dimension where hardly any of the rules apply. It gets strange, and I feel like it was a little bit more difficult to digest as a result. The author was asking the reader to accept a completely different set of circumstances that the first two books had established, and I found it difficult to really get into it compared to the other two. I do think that the first book in this series is my favorite of them. So, Spensa is in the nowhere. She has the choice to return to regular space, but she chooses not to, as she thinks that with her cytonic volatility, she might be a liability to mankind. The nowhere itself has kind of a hollow earth feel to it. Everything, terrain-wise is surrounding a light source in the center. There are islands of stability, places that are called fragments. She can hop from one to the other. The one that she lands in, for example, looks like a jungle. And there are roving pirate bands that hop between the fragments and they fight over whatever resources that they can find. She immediately makes friends with a guy named Chet Starfinder, which is an awesome 1930s pulp name. I expect this guy to be, running around in Art Deco New York with a ray gun or something. He's been stuck in the nowhere for, I want to say it was almost 200 years. He'd been there for a very long time. Obviously, it doesn't break down your body the way that it would here in the somewhere. The real kicker is that she finds out his true identity. Chet Starfinder was just an alias or something. He is Commander Spears, who was the original owner of M-Bot, and he's the one that gave that fighter the order to stand down and stay hidden. From here, Chet and Spensa go hopping through different islands and different fragments. There are pirate gangs, like I said, so they got to be careful. They also start collecting these precious stones. We do a little bit of infinity stone gathering that they need. They also learn that there are places where the nowhere and the somewhere, the two different dimensions, overlap, which was how humans started communicating with aliens across space, but this also led to wars between alien races. Like I said, it gets a little bit weird to understand, but if you read it one or two times extra, it'll probably make a little bit more sense. This book is just very different from the other two. It's a bit of a headbender as Spensa travels through the nowhere dimension, trying to hold on to her own memories as she learns more about it. It's another symptom of spending time there is you start to lose your memories, how you got there, why you're there, what you're doing, and you just become a creature of habit or a creature of impulse. She also learns that the superiority, the super alliance of different alien races, is able to go in and out of the nowhere, and that they are mining precious metals that they need for space travel. That's where they got what they call the acclivity stone. It's something that makes their ships repel gravity. As Chet and Spensa find all the pieces that they need, the stones that they need for their mission, they head into the sun-like object at the center of the nowhere, even though there are delvers, the big bad planet-destroying thingies, trying to stop them. The ending of this book, I'll be honest, it confused the hell out of me, all right? Basically, the Delvers are revealed to be self-replicating artificial intelligences, and Chet was one of them, but Spensa saved him at the end. Like, his memories merge with Spensa, and the only reason Spensa didn't lose her memories the whole time that she was there was that Doomslug was doing some weird jiggery-pokery and transforming into different objects to help her stay focused along the way. It's freaking weird. Also, because she and Jorgen, the Iceman boy back on detritus, are both Cytonics, she was able to talk to Jorgen while she was in the nowhere, and she's given a choice. She ends up choosing to return to detritus. The surprise cliffhanger ending is that detritus is now orbiting another planet. I'm going to guess that the slugs had something to do with moving the entire thing. And now Jorgen has replaced Cobb as the Detritus Defense Force Admiral. We just go through these senior officers like hotcakes. So that's where we are heading into defiant. I'll probably grab a copy of it and read it at some point. I'm not in the biggest rush to do so, but hey, if I've read the 3 books in this series, the 3 main ones, then I might as well see how it ends. I think I only read 1 of the tie-in novels with Jancy Patterson because I started to realize, like, man, I would have to go back and read most of Skyward and huge chunks of Starsight to remember who any of these characters are. Skyward Flight had a lot of characters in it. Obviously FM and Jorgen had a little bit more prominence than the other ones, especially the ones that washed out or were killed off. But this was an instance of me kind of growing away from the series. I am outside of the target audience. There are still plenty of people that do read YA and that read this series in particular. I'll still pick up a good YA book from time to time. I definitely don't read as much of it as I did, 10 years ago. Just my tastes have changed. But Sanderson certainly has enough loyal fans all around the world that are completionists that will, just gobble up anything with his name on it and they'll enjoy it. Good for him. Hopefully this one helps you to get, a quick 20, 25 minute grasp on the series again instead of having to go through all 3 of those books leading up to this one. But then again, I suspect that the diehards already have. So that's it for this recap. Thank you for watching. Check the description below. You can find a link to my own books on Amazon and some other websites where I do longer form or more written out reviews. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.